So the Geek Out is back.
We're back.
All right. So,
oh man,
I tell you, part of it's hard is coming up. We had so many ideas of what we want to talk about next. But with the Venom movie coming up, I thought, what better than to talk about Marvel movies?
Yep. Back to basics.
Now, here's the thing: is I have very low hopes, expectations, I guess you should say, for the Venom movie. Well, you know, I told you 1,000 times how much Venom is so important to me. We had the whole video about, his,
just for Venom.
Definitely check that out. But with that, I thought, why not, with the fact that I'm expecting this might be
a new flop.
To be fair, Venom is a very difficult character to put on screen.
Oh yeah.
So with that, I thought, why not talk about Marvel's worst movies?
Some of the big ones that ended up being a flop.
Yeah. So here we are. We got a top 10 Marvel's worst movies.
So we ended up listing a couple different movies, not necessarily in any particular order, so not saying any are worse or not necessarily saying any are better. If you guys want to point that out for debate, comment it in the comments below. But to start this off, in my opinion, some of the movies that I would say kind of ended up being a flop was definitely the reboot after Tobey Maguire series, with the first reboot of The Amazing Spider-Man, which would only last for Spider-Man 1 and 2, unfortunately.
Yes. Well, I tell you, a lot of people are probably agreeing with us right now. Now, I have my reasons. What about yourself?
For me personally, I have the main two big ones. Would be one, the only thing when it comes to acting across the board. Overall, it was pretty good acting. The one person, though, that they just could not get right was Peter Parker. I'm sorry, but they had this awkward skateboard punk type of thing that wasn't really clicking. A lot of people didn't like that type of turn on Peter Parker.
Yeah, they thought it made him too cool.
Yeah, it was just awkward to see.
I didn't find him to be too cool, but I guess, he wasn't as awkward as what Tobey Maguire was good at doing.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't the same. They couldn't replicate that. And then the other thing was storyline mainly. With the storyline, even if you started to get invested into it, there was a lot of weird points inside of storylines that were kind of intricately weaved in, where they ended up leaving you off on a cliffhanger just for the entire series to be X'd off and then rebooted again.
Wow, yeah, and I thought I feel like they had higher expectations and they were expecting, and we all know they were expecting to talk about doing the Sinister Six and everything that. Yeah. But it's just they just bombshell.
Yeah,
the second one. Now with the first one, I was actually a big fan. I even liked Andrew Garfield, but there was a lot of little things. Cena being a huge Spider-Man and also a comic book fan, that key things to a person's origin stories were left out. That's what I was missing on that. And Tobey Maguire series, they threw little pieces in there to kind of fill it in, even though they didn't dedicate as much as they should have to certain things like the wrestling aspect. I love the idea that he, that he was wrestling because he was just, a teenage kid that got some powers, and he's like, hey, I can make some money off it, just like the rest of us really would, really.
Yeah, my frustration with it was just the fact that they remade the Tobey Maguire series because of comic book specific details. So for example, one of the big pet peeves was that in the Tobey Maguire series, he did create his webs organically versus using a web shooter. That was one of the things that did change, and that was one of the big argumentative reasons. In my opinion, instead of rebooting and killing off this entire storyline, you should have ended up trying to find a way of keeping the original cast and having a story that introduced Peter having to create web shooters.
Oh, I think that was long gone. That series was long gone. Plus, you can't have the same guys, because those guys are 40 years old now.
Yeah.
So, I think a big fail was that they were trying too hard to fill in the blanks of the things that the Tobey Maguire series was missing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they left out the good stuff that was in the Tobey Maguire series. So, all in all, unfortunately, the Amazing Spider-Man didn't end up, being as big as we all wanted to be. It was a big fail when it came to the villains for me on the second Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
Like, I love Jamie Foxx, but I haven't seen him in a movie since. Have you?
Yeah, no.
To be honest, and that type of stuff happens. But yeah, so I hope y'all agree. But we got plenty more. What's next on the list?
So next on the list, since we're talking about grouped movies, I would say Fantastic Four. So this is an interesting one because, in our opinion, we picked two specific ones. One of which was an older movie, and then one of which being the newest.
Let's start chronologically here. Let's go with the older one, Fantastic Four. 2.
The second one. Yeah.
Now I personally chose 2 and not 1 because I'm a big fan of 1.
I am too. I actually really enjoyed 1.
For what it was, see, a lot of people were looking for the dark, gritty Batman movies, but this movie is a campy, fun, family fun movie, and that's what it was. And Chris Evans, like, the casting was good. Not a huge fan of Jessica Alba being Sue Storm, which was ironic because I had the biggest crush on Jessica Alba at the time. But I like to stick with the characters looking like they do in the comic books, and
I gotcha.
They had to change her hair and put in contact, to change her whole look so she can be Sue Storm, which was overdone. And unfortunately, as much as I had a crush on her, she didn't bring it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's where, like, the Fantastic Four 2 started to fail me. But it was really the villain at the end with Galactus.
Yeah, it was just a big cloud type of thing.
I think everybody agrees with me. I love Dr. Doom. They kind of made him campy and cheesy a little bit too. I like that he got the Silver Surfer's board because that's a Dr. Doom thing to do.
Yeah, that is.
But it just the way they defeated him once he got it was kind of mundane compared to the cosmic power that he had. So that was me ventilating a little bit on the Fantastic Four 2.
My thing as well. So similar to the Spider-Man series, cliffhanger type of situation where could have had more, still just suddenly got cut off to then later on, unfortunately, get rebooted into the garbage that was the next Fantastic Four movie.
So good segue.
Yeah, exactly.
Good segue. I guess this would be another good example of where they were trying to differentiate themselves from the previous ones to the point that it was just another epic fail.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? They went from being that fun, campy movie, and let me tell you, if Chris Evans... It was almost like that movie had to fail just so he could be the Captain America. But I thought he nailed it as Johnny Storm, which is always one of my favorite comic book characters.
He did a good job as that.
So when they had Michael B. Jordan come in as Johnny Storm, now I'm a huge fan of Michael B. Jordan. So for me to say this, I guess I had to clarify that was like one of the worst decisions that they could have made. And, I understand they want to try to diversify them, but I'm sure they could have found another way than the actual brother and sister. At least they could have made both of them
the same race,
same color, whatever. But one was white, one was black, and then she was adopted, and there was no real story behind that to kind of clarify why that happened. It was just. It is.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, it was basically the developers kind of created the movie and were like, this is what we're running with, and you have to accept it. If you don't accept it, then, oh well. Like, here's the Fantastic Four movie. But in addition to that, my thing was also, they wanted to remake the film, so the villain that they used, they went back to Dr. Doom again, which I think picking Dr. Doom was not the mistake. However, how they created him as some like awkward alien being from being mixed with some organic like metal liquid thing was nowhere near what it should have been.
No, it was kind of confusing. If anything, I had no idea what was going on.
When the character was first on screen, I was wondering who they were trying to represent. I was like, so is this a knockoff of Silver Surfer? Is this a knockoff of like Dr. Doom? I wasn't even sure until a little bit later on down the road. I was like, oh, okay, so they're trying to represent this character. Right.
And then the movie is, I guess you could call forgettable forgettable. but to the point that like I really don't even remember them fighting using their powers. I remember them going through all the drama of it. You know, it was a very drama intense movie.
I do remember that. Yep.
Dark and gritty, but where was the action? You know. So another big fail for us, the Fantastic Four movies.
Well, the next one in the great list, I guess, in my opinion, one movie that was kind of overlooked was X-Men Apocalypse. So this was a movie that everyone was really, really, really hyped for, and in my opinion, a lot of movies these days have been starting to realize that as long as they make a really good advertisement, that a lot of people will try to see it. But if a lot of people start saying that, you know, oh, hey, this movie is really, really, really bad, in recent events, it's usually been a little bit more true than in the past. So this is definitely one of those movies that they hyped it up a lot. You got to see some villain action and stuff. No one really knew what the full game plan was. And again, it kind of flopped. There wasn't really much when it came to anything more that was offered besides like what you saw in that advertisement.
Right. No, a lot of people agreed that the previews were more action-packed and eventful
than the actual movie.
No, and it's a huge letdown. Again, another example where you have some iconic characters that just didn't fit the bill. You know, you got Apocalypse, who's one of the X-Men's greatest foes, and I felt like he barely did anything throughout the movie. You know, and it's like this, man. I watched all the X-Men animated series as a kid.
Oh, wow.
So it's almost like these movies have to compete with that show. And none of them so far have come close to as epic as that show is. Excuse me. And with my issue with these newer X-Men movies is also how much they revolve the storyline around Mystique. Mystique's character, which really I should say Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah.
You know, I like Jennifer Lawrence, but I'm not a fan of her Mystique. Like, I'm a fan of a lot of her other work, but I actually like Rebecca Romijn Stamos as Mystique. I loved her Mystique. I thought she killed the part.
And makes sense.
And with the fact that Jennifer Lawrence is such a big name, and we had this conversation before, is that when they have big names, they like to revolve the stories around them. Like the original X-Men revolved a lot around Hugh Jackman. You know, so then that's kind of what they're doing with this. But Mystique, you know, they having her be the leaders of the X-Men. She was the leader of the Brotherhood. Of mutants. So she was the leader of the bad guys, not the leaders of the good guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was weird.
It made it cheesy. So at that, another fail. They got Dark Phoenix coming out. Hopefully, that's another great storyline of my childhood that hopefully they can actually do justice to this time.
She deserves it. She definitely deserves a good movie.
Yeah.
But I guess next up on the list.
Well, Since we're still on the subject, we're kind of doing the back to duels. We do have another X-Men movie on the list, don't we?
We do, actually. The next one on the list was actually Wolverine Origins, which was what I was about to mention. So, Wolverine Origins was one of those movies that, again, everyone had really high hopes for. They thought it would be, again, kind of that dark Batman-ish type of storyline, because Wolverine did have a very intense opening story to actually know what his background and stuff was. Because from birth, it was all bones and blood and from birth.
A huge part about that is that Wolverine's backstory was a mystery for majority of his existence. It wasn't until I want to say was the 2000s, early 2000s, late 90s that they came out with the origin story.
Somewhere
I remember I was a little kid and I went and I bought the graphic novel. I was like, that's the only time I ever went and bought the full novel and everything like that. But when it was Wolverine, I had to see it. I had to. But that's also why this is on a list, because being such huge Wolverine fans,
that versus the movie,
something to, we wanted greatness. We wanted our Wolverine to appear on the big screen just like he does, in our in our fantasy.
Yeah.
I guess you could say it sounds a little corny.
Yeah, it was like we were
geeking
hoping,
out right now.
Yeah, it was like we were hoping to see more brought to the table for what Wolverine could have done when it came to like cool action sequences versus also like dialogue sequences or anything like that. Overall, it was still a movie, but it was not that badass. Oh my god, this is a Wolverine movie with grit and gore compared to what it really could or should.
A lot of it, I say, was how they portrayed the outside characters, like Wolverine himself. Hugh Jackman nailed it. Everything he does, he nails it. But Sabretooth, how they had Sabretooth, his brother. That's not.
That was weird.
Yeah,
I didn't like that.
So it was already one thing that he didn't look like Sabretooth, but then also they made him his brother, which is not part of the story. So that just brings another dynamic to the story that doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
And then after they already had Sabretooth in a previous X-Men movie, and they didn't even know each other. So how they go from being brothers to not knowing each other?
Even knowing each other, yeah.
And they try to use that cheesy, and I'm skipping a whole bunch of other things that I found wrong with this movie, but I hated the fact that they shot him in the head at the bullet, and all of a sudden he just loses his memory, and that's how his background.
I forgot about that.
That was like the laziest writing, thanks to Deadpool giving me that line, ever. It really, it blew me away. So that explains why Wolverine lost it. I forgot who Sabretooth was, but why did Sabretooth not know who Wolverine was?
Yeah.
And then you got Gambit, another one of my all-time favorite X-Men characters, who was barely
touched on
did anything.
Yeah.
The guy, he kind of looked the part, but he didn't do much to actually come off as Gambit in any kind of way. And then I'm going off, but we can't leave out the worst part of the movie. Deadpool.
Oh god, I forgot. That was a massacre. Of everything you could have done to represent Deadpool, I really, really, really hope, and I'm glad that they did learn this, obviously, from making the new Deadpool movies, but I hope that they learn, like, not just Marvel, DC as well, that all companies across the board learn, please stick a little bit closer to the comic versus just trying to put together a mess of something that you think is going to please people for, like, oh my god, all these different powers type of thing. Because people are still going to want that original concept and not want it blown out of proportion and not want something that's just this
When I first started
mess.
watching the movie and I see Ryan Reynolds, one of my all-time favorite actors before, even back then. So when I saw him and then he calls him Wade, I'm like, wait a minute, he said, is that Wade Wilson?
Yeah,
and then he calls him the Merc with the mouth, and I'm like geeking out inside. I'm like, this is awesome. I was like, I don't care if all he was gonna be was that background character and they just threw him, a little Easter egg of his name.
Yeah.
But then they turned him into, God knows what that was. I don't know.
To be honest, I still laugh at how, like, the sword things popped out of his arm, because I'm like, yo, they looked at Mortal Kombat and were like, that alien-looking dude with the blade in his arm.
Right. But they sewed his mouth up so you don't have to.
I was like, ooh, this is not a good pick.
Ridiculous. So, anyway, let's fast forward, because we can't help but go off on how bad these movies are. What we got next on the list?
So the next movie definitely wanted to touch on was Daredevil. So even though we've seen a lot of good movies from many of these actors that were inside of Daredevil, this was a movie that they took the concept of a man that's just blind, that has these, like, really cool, almost Spider-Man-like
abilities.
Yeah, abilities to being, agile, to understanding his environment and how to control his body and stuff like that.
Almost having that sixth sense.
Yeah, exactly. That type of extra sense in his body. They took that concept, and instead of it being this cool, darker version of, like, Spider-Man, basically, they twisted it and made it, let's make an alternate Matrix-ish type of movie, where there was, like, really weird, floaty fight scenes type of things that happened.
Yeah, right.
Some unexplainable...
It was like the movie didn't know what it wanted to be. It was like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Exactly.
Yeah. Another one where I don't know if they were trying to be campy. I for some reason I don't believe they were trying to be campy, but that movie definitely came off campy.
Yeah, it did.
And
it just came off of like they understood the concept of the character, but they didn't stick to it at all, and then they just kind of threw something together really quick, and were like, oh, this sounds good for some action. Let's put that in there. Even though it didn't really have much like to do with Daredevil, it was just kind of in there for an action scene.
No, and I was even cool with the Kingpin being Michael Duncan Clark, because even though he changed his race, and I already said I like people looking the part of the character. He was like the Black Kingpin, because Kingpin is really not a big fat guy. He's just a huge blob of muscle, and then Michael Duncan Clark, no offense, is this huge big blob of muscle. So you know what I mean. So that even wasn't even on my list of things that I didn't like about that movie. It was probably the only thing that I was okay with, though.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, everything else, like
everything else needed to be touched.
For real, like Colin Farrell.
Colin
Farrell, like he was an awesome actor before that movie.
Before that movie.
And I don't know what happened, like who was like a completely different person, like the makeup they did on him
it was just
looked so stupid.
It was weird altogether.
Yeah.
I didn't there were so many questions that would pop up in my head that I knew wouldn't be explained that I didn't know what to think after I ended up seeing the movie.
I think of Daredevil as the Marvel's Green Lantern.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
We'll save that for the next DC's worst 10 movies.
Yeah, exactly.
So what we got here, because we're almost near the end here, I think.
Yes, we are. The next movie on the list would definitely be Ghost Rider. So Ghost Rider was one of these movies that a lot of people are really, really, really big fans of the character, and overall, it was a attempt at an action movie that couldn't keep your attention. It was like one of those types of flop movies of, we have a really cool character, another really cool concept with like, let's throw some comedy in there for like some funny spots.
Well, they thought they had a big name actor,
exactly,
and that was all they really needed. They're like, okay, we got an awesome character, a big name actor. Who cares about the rest of this movie? You know what I mean? But the actor is as big as a name, and I love some of Nicolas Cage's older movies.
Right.
I'm not a huge Nicolas Cage fan nowadays, but him as Ghost Rider was one of the biggest casting fails of all time. Like, he just couldn't bring any kind of intensity to the character. He wasn't believable as someone who was really going through the emotions that Ghost Rider goes through, because of Ghost Rider is one of my favorite characters because of
the turmoil
he goes through. Like, he's crossed between what he has to do, what he wants to do, what he needs to do, and what he should do. You know what I mean? And it's crazy because he's forced into this situation. But anyways, I'm gonna carry it away. But
of course.
But no, with the Ghost Rider movie, huge letdown. Another thing was like, what happened in that movie? Who was the main bad guy? I
couldn't even tell you.
No, it's forgettable, very forgettable. One of the most forgettable movies that I was wondering if anybody else even knew this movie. I was looking at some other top 10s and it wasn't on the list, and I was surprised because some of the other ones were better than this movie. It even came out with a sequel that went straight to Blu-ray or DVD.
Really? A
lot of people don't even know there's a sequel to that
I didn't even know there was a sequel.
That's how bad that movie was.
I did not know that. Wow.
Alright, what we got next?
So we're down to our last two. Speaking of forgettable movies, the second Thor movie that they ended up releasing, after they ended up starting to develop this MCU for theaters, they ended up developing Thor into another movie where it was a solo movie that they casted on the side. It's so forgettable. The actual title is actually trying to remember it. I can't, but I remember the basic storyline was Thor ended up having to fight some other extraterrestrial being that was like some type of elvish mixed with goblin type of looking thing. It was like Thor Dark World or something like that, I think.
Or Thor Space Elves or
Oh
something.
yeah, it was something like that. I'm like, this story is it's kind of whack. Like, overall, it's one of those movies as well. Like, if you're talking about the MCU overall, you'll never hear it even discussed. Like, people will be like, who is the villain? Like, what was this about again? Like, no one cares about this movie.
Because you know what? Because at first, when you brought it up, I was ready to defend the movie, but then when you said, who was the bad guy? I had no answer for it. Like, I can kind of picture. I remember they took some kind of like steroids and juiced up or something like that into like a giant like super elf or something like that. Like,
exactly.
From elf to ogre or something.
Yeah, exactly.
It was kind of definitely forgettable. So it definitely made our list for that one reason at all. But we got one last one, and we saved this one the best for last, I guess, or the worst for last in this case.
Debatable, but for sure definitely has to be on the list is Spider-Man 3 from the Tobey Maguire series.
Right, so Spider-Man 3 is definitely, we gotta save that for last because one, the Venom movie's coming out, and two,
exactly.
I have so many reasons why this is my least favorite. You know, it's like this man, again, one of my favorite all-time favorite characters, not just Spider-Man, Venom.
Yeah.
Being misportrayed, you know, with the geekiest guy on TV at the time, you know, like we had this conversation, and I'm not gonna get too carried away because we talked about it in the previous episode, but how they can have the geekiest guy
in the world try to pull off a character like that.
How are they gonna have, you know, someone like that portray Eddie Brock? You know,
yeah, it was
I'm getting emotional. I can't even finish this conversation.
But yeah, for that movie, there were so many different things that ended up all going wrong at the same time. So again, we're left with the same scenario of A, I hate the fact that they end up leaving a cliffhanger where an entire series has to get rebooted. So that's one thing. B, how they ended up representing the idea of how Venom and stuff came in. They got it right with him coming into an asteroid and coming onto Peter Parker and then him having hatred for it. And compared to the argument for how Venom looks whenever he's on characters, I don't want to necessarily say that it was a bad representation when it came to it's cool that it was like a second layer of skin.
I don't think he looked bad at all. I think it was the guy who played Eddie Brock, the fact that he was not an intimidating character even when he was wearing the Venom costume. He was almost adorable as Venom. Like, come on.
Yeah, my thing is for a character that was supposed to be like big, intimidating, like ripping people's heads off type of character.
Yeah.
He was kind of small and annoying type of thing. Right. He looked like one of those things that you just didn't want around.
And it was short-lived. He barely was even in the movie. I felt like he was at the end of the movie and it was over. And
they killed him off like almost immediately.
Because they spent most of the time showing Tobey Maguire walking around like a doofus and being a douchebag and with those corny dance moves.
Yeah, we're not gonna. Let's not mention the jazz dancing.
So but that's why this is what on the list, and it's probably my all-time favorite. Like, we didn't put any of them in particular order. We saved this for last because we're referencing the
fact
movie,
that the new Venom
movie's coming out. We're gonna be doing the review this weekend, and with that being said, I say this is probably my least favorite movie. Because of the fact that they not only butchered one of my favorite villains, but also one of my favorite superheroes. And like you said, it ended a great franchise. Because everybody loved the first two Spider-Man movies. The only one that anybody ever talks bad about was Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
I think
that was a good video. Yeah, I think that's it, guys.
So, hope you guys enjoyed geeking out with us as always, and look out for this weekend. We're gonna do the Venom review.
Catch you on the flip side.
Hopefully the best. You know, I really like. Hopefully the best for Tom Hardy because he's a great actor, and
yes,
I hope it doesn't end up happening to him. What happened to Jamie Foxx?
Yeah, Jamie Foxx.
So please, hopefully, what happened to Jamie Foxx doesn't happen to him.
Exactly.
Till next time.
Have a good night.
Wait. We forgot the #1 worst Marvel movie ever. Now, unfortunately, Evan wasn't able to make it for this. He agrees as well. Hulk, the first Hulk movie, is by far the worst Marvel movie ever made. From the horrible CGI. 1 minute he's busting through the walls of a building, next minute he's barely bigger than a car, to the cheesy Hulk dogs, to the name change, all the way up to the main bad guy was just a lightning cloud, and there was like no actual action in it, and we never got to see Hulk smash. So with that being said, over all of the horrible movies that Marvel had made, that one is definitely #1. On the count of 3, we're gonna say if we love it or hate it.
All right.
Ready? 1, 2, 3.